All right, Morgan, did you have some quick updates or?
Um, yes. Well, right now the big thing is the CompuCell 3D. Um, I forget what he calls it. Workshop, summer school.
Yeah.
But this is the annual week that James Glazier and team go through. The It's like a short course of I think of it as kind of like a short course of his year long courses, or his actual semester courses, because he does both, like fully online YouTube videoed. um but that's always good. And he also gets some great speakers. I think they just did the uh open VT for like virtual tissue meeting. And yeah, I'll try and find some resources. I mean, in terms of what was covered there, kind of what was done there. um yeah, still a really unique, or still uh, kind of like the only group in town certainly doing this as comprehensively. I feel, um, as some, although what was I just yeah. Anyway, it's like I see a couple groups that do similar kind of depth on kind of like single cell biophysics. But again, like this kind of emphasis on multicellular still seems pretty unique. Um, yeah, so that's certainly the big outside. Well, the other big thing right now is the conference that everybody's in New York for, is the neuromodulation NYC. And so this is like s- certainly a big um, transcranial, well, transcranial of all physics forms, certainly electromagnetic. Um, um, People hooking batteries up to your head. Um, people people having figure eight coils with current flowing through to induce magnetic fields. um, all sorts of good neuromod work. And then and then following that is actually the next week is computational cognitive neuroscience. Because and I know that one of the, like, the kind of main med art guy, Paul Scotty, is going to be presenting their Cortex MAE um, model at yeah, DCN. Um, so those are kind of like the big conferences things. I was hoping yesterday to meet Gene Rintoul, who'd be back in the Bay Area, and to tell me about FUN, which is focused ultrasound neuromodulation. Um, but it was in Paris, so I'm assuming it was also fun, although probably hot.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so it is conference season, or this is the this is the time where people use use um, use grant money to travel to nice parts of the world. And uh, yeah, and hopefully I'll be able to find more videos of talks and things. Um, and then, well, yeah, and then just definitely been doing a lot of uh, finishing up, trying to get ready for the San Francisco CogSci reading group that will be next, that is coming up this next week, or is it next week or the week after? Uh, but as you can see in my repos, yeah, I've just been replicating a number of these mechanistic interpretation papers that are also very very tied into um, how you train reasoning models, LLM reasoning models, and so certainly the spinning up mech interp resources are definitely getting fleshed out as I find more open resources for training full reasoning models, done in an open science way, so you can really learn how these are put together, as well as like the when somebody comes out with a paper like Anthropic that wants to make some sort of leap um, to consciousness. um, you can you can have a better sense of like what kind of math they're trying to stretch into that shape. um the yeah Nathan Lampert is the researcher that I most recently found, that you'll see his videos. He's at, again, the Allen AI Institute, that has been really, so one, he's got an open source book, um, reinforcement learning, human feedback, and which is really documenting his experience training Olmo. um, and again, like this extra stage of training that is now the norm, where you've and how it works, you know and so it's great. He's got full YouTube series, as well as like he's got, like, just recently he was um interviewing somebody else that used to work there, talking about their experience, talking about papers, like it was also interesting just hearing them talking about working on this, seeing papers from other labs, kind of like in real time, and kind of like responding, like learning from this continual stream of research papers to see what was good, see what they thought was crazy, given their own experience doing this, and working at this scale. Again, like, super interesting, and yeah, and I think, just to say that in doing this, it's like I've gotten to the point where I think it would be interesting to start engaging with some of the AI safety people. Um, but I think, like, it in even stronger form at this point, I see um, the real linguistic dangers that you get into trying to ask a model questions about the model's interior experience. It's like, if you thought psychiatrists have a problem, I think some of the AI safety people, the way in which they approach the same problem, is yeah, needs a good 100 years of experience to you know make it a bit more make it a bit more solid, to kind of catch up with psychiatry. Um, oh, just these are just my um, most recent agentic coding is focused on training reasoning models. Jess.
Okay. Um, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, and I agree with the sort of the psychiatry stuff, but also like I kind of I feel like I wish I kind of was heard it like 5 minutes ago or whatever. But I think I want to agree with you, but I don't know that I'm just generally agreeing or like specific things because I've been having so many conversations lately about differentiating model and um you can say anthropomorphization of it, but just like what th- there's sort of this really understanding some of the technical of what is the thing doing versus all of
Mm,
this like
yes.
I continued where in a short version, and I'm happy to we can go into this later or critique this because I don't think what I'm saying is sort of a sort of a gospel or a whatever, but like I I'm just surprised. I guess I'll put it this way: I am surprised at how much I really just want there to be new terms and taxonomies for what is happening. Because I'm really tired. I'm getting increasingly tired, and I'm getting frustrated. And I always talk about language models, artifacts. Anyways, that's a me thing. Okay, it's a personal problem, if you will. But I'm getting increasingly, in a visceral sense, combative. I'm not actually being combative, but in a visceral sense, I'm like, I really wanna challenge certain people and ideas. This is not a commentary on what you or anybody said here. This is my own baggage right now. It's happened to be on my mind this morning. But I'm really increasing, like, in a constructive sense, I'm learning how to tease apart arguments and try to get at the core of this. In a less constructive sense, like, I feel very combative sometimes about, like, people need to it we have an inadequacy of the language model's artifacts at hand to describe what's going on in some cases, or at least in terms of differentiating, here's the human equivalent of what we want. Here's what makes sense. Here's what this layer of agentic preparation has facilitated by making it more human-like and all that stuff. But it's like I continue to want there to be um I'll come back to this later, and I'm gonna resist. I've had wonderful conversations already this morning, and I'm fine. I'm primed to do a lot of ranting. So I'm gonna say I'm impressed or surprised at after this whole year of doing a lot of things and some of the works other interns are doing and everything else. I'm surprised at how much I've become even more in the mind that there's just so much like you said, like, go back to what you said, 100 more years of research about stuff. It's like, yeah, like, and not and this sort of intellectual dishonesty or ingenuousness or something along where it's like proceeding forth, like, the lack of caution about applying certain terms to trying to understand what's happening or creating these likenesses of things is, like, very it just has riled me up much more than I expected outside of
Yeah.
today, so I'll leave
Yeah.
it there.
It's and what this is coming off the back of for myself is really, about kind of like three papers from kind
Mm,
of frontier labs, if you will, that make strong cognitive science claims, you know,
mm,
and and that my part of this is to prepare. for a reading group around these. Part of it is that these papers came with no code and no data. So it's like all you could have is an armchair, and being sick of having armchair discussions
Mhm.
about computational projects. It's just like I have no idea how the field is. I mean, again, it's because so many of these groups actually work for companies and aren't academics,
Mhm.
that the field has become so accepting of letting people not write papers, write preprints, and not, you
Yes.
know, preprints about computational projects that don't include code and data, which is the most crazy thing. And so I'm coming off of a kind of a spring of AI meetings that are about, like these aren't AI like when I was a student. This is AI where these are all computational objects that we now have and can play with. And yet we're going into AI meetings where we don't have the code and data. And so we end up armchairing this, like doing armchair discussions about the topics, which I
Yeah.
just think is insane. And then I go in and I look at these papers and I'm like, with agentic tools say, like, okay, how hard would it be to actually generate the code and data for these projects, leaving aside that I can't, get access to Anthropic or something like that. And
No,
then
this is
the AI Institute's, the Allen AI Institute's work has been really helpful in this, where it's just like, oh, wait, you mean you can actually get access to this work? It doesn't have to be an armchair discussion. You can actually have the objects in place. And most of these papers don't hold up at all. In terms of like, I mean, honestly, Anthropic's paper has held up the best in terms of at least computationally replicating its particular
mhm.
work. The damage in the Anthropic paper is more one of language than it is of at least computational replicability. Um, but it's also this sense that like the some of the other papers, like there's a real lack of controls and real lack of worrying about the confounds, as opposed to jumping forward with much more kind of
Yeah.
emotional claims of deception, consciousness, and um, interesting emotional dialogue, right?
It's a
it's
bit it's a bit
where
like
it's
the
just like it's
okay.
like, did you guys control for simple things like sentence length and things like that, where it's kind of funny. Yeah, anyway, that was my rant.
No, and that's well well said.
Well, yeah, I mean that's great. It's interesting discussion about replication, and well, I'm sure that some of that is because the people who put the preprints out are working on proprietary things. Also, that maybe they don't have it, in a environment where people can access the models directly, and some of that is proprietary, and some of that is because it's because you're having to use the computational resources that they had at their disposal in their organizations. Um, but yeah, I mean, it would be nice to be able to replicate these things, especially when you start making claims about the cognitive science aspects of it. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to demonstrate these in like a smaller toy model, say, where you could say, okay, well, we think the model is doing this, so we could set up an environment where it does this, and then demonstrate something, because oftentimes, even with experiments in animals, we don't actually, we don't do the naturalistic version of it. We do like some sort of contrived version in an experiment. We say, oh yeah, this is representative of this thing that's going on in the brain or in the mind. And then, of course, the replication part where, you don't have the code or things like that. And that's a problem, I think, more generally in science, where people don't, I mean, traditionally haven't provided the code. And so that's always been a thing. And there's been this whole argument about, well, we've had this discussion in meetings before about replication, where you publish a paper and then people can't replicate it. Sometimes that's the fault of the methods that they use, lack of controls or, lack of rigor. But sometimes it's also just because some things don't replicate. So it's a great discussion. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if, okay, I guess we'll come back to that later.
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I happy to talk on this subject more. When it's the right time.
Yeah.
Um, the yeah, and uh, I've been impressed with these open science groups that like like MedArc and like Cohere being one of the kind of like more LLM focused science labs. Um, uh, and I feel like, you know, I do feel like there's a real opportunity here for this kind of, this particular kind of computational cognitive science, around these, or I don't know what to call it. It's
Yeah.
like again, like I think cognitive science is the wrong thing because it's an artifact made from training on our language.
Right.
um well, and again, with reasoning models, it's trained on our language as the next token prediction. Then it's supervised, fine-tuned, and then which is like again off of um you know kind of like chosen sentences,
Right.
and then it's reinforcement trained, you know uh, potentially again with human feedback, right?
Right.
And other models, it's like, so you know like it's not just, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at in terms of like consciousness research is, when Anthropic's making this claim about consciousness, it's like you're not really talking about the next token prediction stuff. You're really talking about the RL, the RLHF part, right?
Right.
Um, and so it's trained on all of our texts, but it's also kind of trained on our behaviors, right? So
Yeah.
but at the same time, like I think it's probably a misnomer to call it, computational cognitive science. like
Yeah.
like yeah, it's artificial behavior or something, yeah. But that is the other thing that I think is like very Emily Bender, which is that, like, our entire, our language is not ready for this. And
Right.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why like I'm thinking, I'm reminded of the grad student in Patty May's Fluid Interfaces MIT Media Lab space, because I was talking with in one of the seminars that the AHA group runs. I was raising questions sort of along these lines, and Patty mentioned the student, and their thesis or whatever is about uh, behavioral science for machines, basically. And it was like, yeah, like I'm very, like, I really want to go back to my point, and we can move on to other things. Is that I really think, like, we just, to try to be concise and pithy, all the stuff Morgan said is applicable to the sort of requirement to build out the language itself. This is not pithy at all. I'm sorry, but like the direction a lot of things are going in is almost like it feels diametrically opposed at times to, like, instead of racing forward using like kind of crappy terminology, like makeshift cob jobs of like, well, I'm gonna use this term to explain this thing, and that's cool, and like that also opens the door for like fun, hype, big stuff as well. Is like diametrically opposed to I call it theory work of developing the language, like the philosophy, the language, and the structure of what you're trying to do relative to what exists. You can't just keep laying down the same tile over and over and over again and expecting a different outcome. It's like you gotta make a different tool for the purpose. So I will close on that.
Okay, well, sorry. Now I have to jump into just one last thing. It's just like the other thing that got me going is seeing a Sam Harris video talking to an AI alignment guy, and Sam Harris just couldn't stop talking about like his, I don't know if it's his partner or his like collaborator, but just like having these discussions with Claude and about like meditation or something like it reminded me of who's the guy, um um was it like Roger Penrose or someone recently who talked about their conversations with Claude. um it wasn't Roger Penrose.
It's Richard Dawkins,
um
maybe.
Dawkins,
Yeah,
Dawkins. Thank you,
yeah,
thank you. Yes, yes, yeah. It was like the worst kind of anecdotal, the worst kind of anecdotal discussion, and yet I came away feeling like that I was talking to a person. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you sharing this with us? We can do better. We can do better. Yeah.
Like, can you go back to like 1966 and talk to Eliza and feel the same thing too? Like, anyway,
Exactly, right? I mean, I'd prefer, yeah, yeah. Anyway,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, but that goes back to my point about like we need to, if we want to explore some of these things, we maybe need to build a model, like a toy model, to like demonstrate what we're actually getting at. Because it's not just the language; it's sort of the concepts. We have a concept
yeah,
of cognition that is rooted in human cognition, and we can
yeah,
compare it. We can compare whatever a machine is doing to that, but there are things that conceptually it's probably there are distinctions that a lot of these groups don't get into because they're interested in like doing the preprint, and then I don't know. So they kind of drift away from the actual cognitive science of it, but they make a cognitive science claim, which is kind of weird. I mean, like the business of a lot of the AI groups is to write a technical paper, and they kind of use that to kind of advance these kind of claims, and it's like, well, that's inadequate. You need to kind of work on validating or invalidating the claims, and that requires pure research in cognitive science using different tools that kind of get rid of a lot of the confounds or get rid of a lot of the ambiguities. It
yeah.
looks like Jesse is getting a
Why
screen.
why I'm pulling this up again in support of your point is like I I feel like the rigor of the work that Bradley described and that Morgan's sort of pointing to, and I'm awkwardly flailing my arms at, is so there are people doing it. It's sort of like actual advancement will come through doing that. And so I'm bringing up the infamous behavior purpose teleology paper and saying, like, this is sort of a line in time of 1943, but there's been certain developments in a particular path of what that has been, and it's sort of like there's not really a lot of, you know and this is what I think like Michael Levin is trying to do in a lot of ways is circling back around and being like, okay, or like there's a paper of sorts. I guess a manuscript is a better way to say it that I'm writing, and I think I mentioned it here before, but it's like cognitive science 1.0 went in a very particular direction about what it bracketed or didn't bracket in terms of methods and analogies and what it's trying to do, and this is what it is. And it's like, okay, given this, let's hold for this and do this specific thing and go in this direction. And it's like there's not really this for lack of better words, respect for those choices and saying, well, we have to keep building. We'll keep in my tile analogy. We'll keep using these same tiles and stack them, and throw AI and technology at it. It's like there's a certain there's a certain inadequacy to it. And then as taking it down into the more, for lack of better words, concrete things that Bradley just said. Doing that work in the context of the broader project of the last 80 years is important. So we're coming up with the part of what we're dealing with is sort of an immense lack of poverty and excess in sort of this technological stuff, and then there's still these other things that are kind of, I don't want to say constraints, but there's limits in other cases that will need to be contended with because the other stuff just won't hold and so on. Anyway, I will cease for the time being.
Poverty of the conceptual stimulus, I guess. Yeah, that's because we do have all these tools, but we don't know exactly, and we're making claims that we can't substantiate. So, I mean, it's like,
and just because we're in a moment now where you can make like it is this is the year. This like I know I'm being recency biased for someone, but like I can't think of a time 2025 or 2026 if you're going to make money or just make unsubstantiated claims along certain things, this is the time to do it. Like we are in a golden era of making unsubstantiated claims. And maybe that's not actually true, but it certainly feels like it. Like it really feels like, and so it's like a lot of the work that I'm doing in certain things is I fuss about it and I talk about it, and then I sort of be like, this is sort of what's happening. There are things you can do that are not that are harder and be less glorious or less visible in the way that it is visible right now. But like, if you want to do those things and you want to roll up your sleeves and do it, like you can. And I think that's important for people to know too. So it's not just complaining. It's like they're like, I'm going to look at Morgan's repo again and look at that stuff, but all the stuff we're talking about here, and the work is there. It's hard to do, but it's there. So, okay,
yeah.
let's move on to another subject because I feel like I'm kind of holding the train up from moving on.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. That's good conversation to have.